everybody, my name's Yumi Stynes. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the Gadigal people and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. They are the traditional custodians of the land on which the Art Gallery of New South Wales stands. It's called the Eora Nation and it is one of the most beautiful places in the entire world. So thank you. You've joined us tonight for Art After Hours Online. It's a weekly talk series where you hear artists, thinkers and celebrities in conversation as they explore themes and artworks from the exhibitions that are currently on display in the gallery. A content warning for tonight. This discussion will be focusing on art that explores the body and sexuality, and it does include artworks that contain sexually explicit imagery. If this is not for you, or if you're worried about little people who are in the room with you, then please switch off now. This week we're exploring our new exhibition, Pat Larter, Get Arted. It's the first solo exhibition of this Australian artist in a public art museum. So let me tell you a little bit about her. Pat's art playfully, provocatively and joyfully challenged conventions of the male gaze and stereotypes of female desire and sexuality through film, performance, photography, mail art, collage, printmaking and painting. When you think about it, human bodies have been a key subject in the art world for centuries. However, the female body and its representation is almost always decided on, created and curated by men. So what changes when it's created by a woman? For over 20 years throughout her practice, Pat Larter explored what it meant to own and inhabit her body and her own image. She was an artist, also a mother of 5, a partner and muse to her husband, fellow artist Richard Larter, and she constantly explored what it meant to blur all of these aspects of her busy life through her practice. But consistently throughout her work, the body was both the subject and the canvas. And this evening, to make it all tie together beautifully, we're joined by 2 internationally renowned performance artists, Grumble and Queenie Bon Bon, who also explore the politics of the body and sexuality in their creative practices. You may have heard of Grumble. She is an alter ego of this person, Emma May Gibson, a performance artist and sex clown who recently found a whole new audience when her morning workouts called Grumble Boogie, live streamed on Instagram during this year's lockdown, went viral. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And joining us through a live stream, Queenie Bon Bon, who is a London-born, Melbourne-based sex worker, writer and performance artist who has written and performed works that toured Europe, the US and Australia. They have a full-length video of one of those shows on their website, deeplyleisured.com, and has their first collection of writing coming out in January through First Draft Publishing. Welcome, Queenie.
Hi.
Hi, so good to talk to you both. I'm very excited, and a big welcome to everybody who's watching this for the first time. If you've got a question, please put it to our moderators and we'll see if we can get it to our guests tonight. I want to start with you, Grumble. What do your works and your art practices have in common with Pat Larter's artworks?
Yeah, well, I must admit I hadn't heard of Pat, and I have much pleasure in getting to know her in this exhibition. I think immediately I connect to her joy energy and the playfulness in the works. And it's interesting that you said the body is a canvas before, because I'm realizing more and more that my body is the site of the storytelling that I'm discovering with this Grumble that I created. So yeah, I really connect to her sense of joy, but also the availabilism in her work,
sure.
Like the stuff that she uses to make herself hyper real and hyper sensual and hyper ridiculous. So really, I'm a sex clown. I come from a long history of sex clowns. I think, yeah, I'm so happy to know Pat now. It's very exciting.
I love that, yeah. And if you're lucky enough to be in New South Wales, you can visit the Art Gallery of New South Wales and see Pat's exhibition for free. Queenie, what about you? What do your artworks have in common with Pat Larter's?
Yeah, I think I had a similar experience of it being a really joyful thing to uncover the work that Pat does and really see all those shared spaces that we inhabit. I think especially around having such a hybrid practice that is very sort of collage based. You know, in my practice, I use a lot of video art, also incorporating a lot of things like text message, and I think just having there's a real sort of blend in that work. I think also, creating work that is really, I feel like, a peeled back layer of expectation, that it exposes new ideas around how people sort of inhabit and navigate space that is often, where domestic and erotic sort of nestles together.
You know what, I'm so excited to talk to you both. I could barely sleep last night, but I really want to just almost hit pause on this moment, because speaking to you both, I feel like you're both sort of mid-career artists who you don't have the overview of what your whole body of work means, because your body of work is still being created, and that's super exciting. So thank you so much. Sex clown, can you please tell us what you mean? You just said you come from a long line of sex clowns?
I think that despite what the status quo makes us feel about sex and sexuality in the body, there's a long history of artists and women artists and queer artists that have used their bodies and teased out what it is to behave and misbehave with an audience. And yeah, I have a lot of debt to pay to people like Annie Sprinkle and Glitter Supernova and Elizabeth Burton, like people that displayed their bodies and their sexuality with a divine sense of play. So yeah, a sex clown is what it sounds like. There's a sex clown in each and every one of us, and I just want to bring them all out.
Okay, do you agree? Is there a sex clown in you, Queenie?
Look, I'm open to there being one, but I don't know them at this point.
Okay.
But I'm really open to meeting any potential sex clowns that are inhabiting my vessel.
I just feel like mine would be hideous with sharp teeth kind of going, Queenie, what about pleasure? I'm interested to understand how pleasure informs your work and whether that is one of the great taboos.
Yeah, I think pleasure is actually really foundational in my work, but I think my pleasure actually often, I think, is a little bit counter to what people expect from a sex work creating art about pleasure, that my pleasure is often just in about how we discover to be in our bodies, what the joy is to just inhabit ourselves, to be able to be seen in our fullness, to understand ourselves in our fullness. And I feel like that's a real huge part of this work that sex workers create, because when other people create our work, we're so often this really 2D images of ourselves. So to really reclaim ourselves in fullness, I think is where my pleasure is really situated in my work.
I've heard you say that before. There are two-dimensional representations of sex workers. They're either utterly miserable or they're sort of whore with a heart of gold. Is that right? Yeah. And you just want to sit in that and be more whole.
I just want to be able to hold the complexities that we all have, and just be like, I want to be able to hold grief and joy and be in my body and be fully dimensional and sexual or unsexual, but just in my wholeness.
Tell us about some of the panic you encounter, Queenie, not just when you perform, but just by existing.
I feel like I feel like panic when I'm performing, that people, I've done performances before where people have come up to me afterwards and said like how did you think of these stories? And I'm like, they're my stories. And they're like, yeah, but you're not real. Like, that's not, you didn't do those things, did you? And can't accept that a sex worker would have been, is also able to create this work. So I think there's this real disconnect. I think there's also just a panic in that if I am an artist and I am like everyone else, that creates a disconnection to who we understand sex workers and whores to be, and as something that we often disconnect from being in our community and being people that are around us. I think people hate the idea that, if I'm just like them, it means the people that I have sex with are the same people that they have sex with for free.
Wow. So they almost want you to be an avatar for a real sex worker and you're their spokesperson.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating. Do you experience or encounter panic, Betty Grumble?
Yeah, look, Yeah, there's panic around this idea of like low art and high art, and that if you are a fleshy body exploring yourself in like ways that might be mischievous or in ways that are challenging what we deem to be like serious performance art, I think there's panic around where people want to put you in a place, like people like to do with people in society. So I'm interested in the space in between things. That's why I sit here, I'm like, I'm MMA, I'm a grumble. I really want to tease out that space. And Queenie, you were talking about reclamation energy, and I think that's in like Pat's work as well. And there is a paradox that I make work because it's instinctual for me to use my body in this way and to seek pleasure this way. Like the act of performance art is a sex act for me as well. Like the audience and I were all fucking together in the room. But paradoxically, I'm saying, yeah, fuck me, but I'm also saying, fuck you, to the idea that we can't be in control of our bodies in this way.
Are you in agreement of that, Queenie?
I mean, I'm in agreement that when I create a performance that I am in movement, that I am holding space for the idea of like expansion and creating new worlds, and for us to be able to do this movement work together and hold space together, which I feel like is a similar idea of like growth, expansion, joy.
Maybe I'm probably 3 or 4 steps behind both of you in terms of my enlightenment and my wokeness, but seeing the Pat Larter exhibition made me think about how a woman's body in art is expected to be hot, to fit certain rules about what is attractive and what's not. And if you are or you're not, you are allowed to show or you're not allowed to show. Is that a Betty Grumble idea that she unpacks?
Well, look, I have a very able body and a very kind of normative, like hot body. So I created Grumble. She's got this really, for those who haven't seen her, when I first created her, I thought about her as a war mask. Because I'm going to make this monstrous head and then disrupt the gaze that was kind of, I felt was, and what I'd experienced to be an assault. But now in my practice, I've enjoyed discovering that glamour spell that I created as more of a love letter. So it's a complex spiral of a lot of things at once. But I feel like that goes on with Pat as well. Like she's monstrous and sensual and a lot of things at once. And I think people like women to be one particular way, just not disruptive in those ways.
And she doesn't seem to care if you find like it appealing or not, or palatable.
She's like, today I was thinking about what do I want to say about Pat, but what turned me on so much is she's like, see me, and this is another way of seeing, and I've been thinking about the power that it is to be seen.
Queenie, can we talk to you about the idea of a war mask or something that you do to I guess address the way that you look and play with that in your art practice?
I mean, I feel like there is in my practice, it is all based on, a character that is meant to be desirable because that is how I make money. But my art practice also exists in my workspace and my domestic space. And I think that's very similar for lots of people who work outside of like the institution. There is this merging of realities. So I think it's not so much my wall mask, but I think the thing that I put up is that I'm very grounded in community, and that is the thing that is safe for me. And I think I really have a bubble in that.
One of the things that you said in your video, Queenie, was about self-care and how that can sometimes mean not caring about your community, and it really stuck with me, and I started to worry that maybe do you consider yourself a leader in your community?
No, I feel like I'm one part of the cogs that do movement work and do community building, and I'm invested in that, and that's I have a place in that, but yeah, I don't see myself as leading it, but definitely as part of it.
Among your work, you organise fundraisers for sex workers.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like at least partially a leadership role, I would suggest. Okay, let's talk about something that you've raised already, Queenie, which is about the domestic space leading into the erotic space. One of the things that Pat Larter did, which I found super fascinating, was practice art mail. I don't know if I'd heard of this until I saw the exhibition recently here at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, but it was basically people would ask for her to send them an artwork and she would send them something in an envelope and maybe put a stamp on the back of a photograph and post that out and do it over and over again. So intimate to receive the letter and open it and look at it. There's an intimacy. So I want to put it to both of you, but start with you, Queenie. Does your work do something similar?
Yeah, I feel like, I create work that really is intimate and is often about relationships that is, I think, can be quite disruptive of the isolation that workers feel at work or in public spaces. And that, we're often in these really different geographical distances. We often work in these really separate ways, and to create work that is seeing our community and acknowledging many of the things that are shared experience, I think, is this really intimate space. But I think also a lot of the ways that, workers now use social media, like we use Instagram, I think they do have this really special, intimate sharing things where we are sharing these, moments, and it is, I think it is a real part of disruption in isolation that workers often feel.
Can you help us to understand what that might look like, Queenie, for those of us who haven't followed an account from a sex worker?
I think it's just that, often workers will share, will have accounts that are work accounts, but they will also, that might also have commentary or memes or, that there is this real meshing of different parts of our identity that will be shared in these, spaces, and just that we have these ways to connect with each other. And I think that, because it's not letter writing now, because we occupy this online space, that is more what it looks like, how we do these really intimate acts. But I think there's this really important part, similar to, Pat's work, of how, that our workspaces, we're creating art from what we have around us in our workspaces. And sometimes that is interpreted as, porn. Sometimes that is interpreted of, bending these different genres. And sometimes these are really coded messages that, will read really differently to depending on who's looking at the image.
That's right. In jokes sometimes
Yeah.
is one of the kind of ways we could use to describe that, is a message that might be read completely differently by different people. Betty, your body is definitely part of your work. For people who've never seen you at play and at work, can you tell us about what you do?
Well, yeah, I've been really lucky to have a craft and training that have given me lots of skill to use my body in a particular way, and I really love, often in a routine, I do lots of high kicks, love doing a can-can routine, love to explore the collision of what you'd expect a traditional entertainment to be with a task-based action performance art. I've got this work called The Unshame Machine, where with reverence to my mother, who was a natural bodybuilder, I get on, there's a photograph of it right now, I get on this lateral pull-down machine and do 1,000 pussy prints. And this photograph was actually taken when we did the installation, which is like a traditional durational performance art piece, but in this cabaret environment, we had guest artists. So yeah, I really get off on challenging my body physically, and then in real time experiencing fatigue and exhaustion, moving through that.
Can you explain what we're looking at now?
What we're looking at right now is a print of my yoni. That is a pussy print, maybe even from that performance. And so I first did pussy prints in a show called Love and Anger, where I'm singing and pussy printing and handing it out to the audience. So I feel connected to Pat in that way.
Yeah.
And then after the show, I used to stand out the front and sign them as well, until that got a little bit too strange. But I really like this idea of pollinating and kind of making a democracy of my punani in this way to unshame it and to discover all the different ways in which a part of me could then go out into the world. And I get lots of really lovely photographs from people's living rooms with the frames.
Do you really?
All over the world, yeah. I think of them as portals, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, the multi-pussy.
What? Really?
Yeah.
Just, is it looking out or is it, I don't know, what's it doing?
You can step through and then we're all connected.
I love it so much. Unshame Machine. Is there anything that resonates with your work for that, Queenie?
Look, I think there are like lots of things about having special spaces of intimacy. And, I think that my work is, I really try and create these very intimate spaces, and will often do these performances that are, just for my community, to have that intimate bubble portal space where we exist for these moments, and it's ethereal and then it stops. And if you were there, it happened. And if you recall it, you can, and it maybe has altered. And yeah, that's my portal that I offer.
And what about this idea of trying to wear down shame?
Yeah, I feel like shame is such a limiter in all of our lives. I mean, I think being able to confront the things and be able to really hold that and like dismantle that shame and look at it and laugh at it, and it doesn't disappear, but how we can hold it in these different ways, and also being able to understand whose shame we're holding, because sometimes I feel like there's so many marginal artists who are forced to hold other people's shame, which is heavy and unnecessary, and we have better work to do. So I think doing the work which names that and leaves that behind is really important art practice and life practice work to do.
It feels like we could be doing it for the rest of our lives and still find residues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very it's sticky and it is everywhere.
Well,
people love to pour it on us.
They do, yeah. People love to hand it over to you and try and get you to take it. No. Let's talk about humour in your work. Queenie, you're very funny, and I think it's so great. But is being funny sometimes an obstacle to being revered as an artist?
Yeah, I reckon. But also, I don't know if I I don't think my end goal is like ending up being seen as an artist. Like, my end goal is to have felt joy. So I feel like I'm, doing the right thing. I think a lot of times, I think there can be a hard thing if you're trying to explain something really complex, and sometimes for people they're able to hold those messages if you're giving it to them with also joy, but also for some people they are not able to receive the big messages and can just take away the lull, which it's a journey.
One of the reasons we're here is this staircase is actually the entry point to the library and the archives of the Art Gallery of New South Wales, where Pat Larter's artworks have been stored after they were donated to this place after her death 20 years ago. And it's only now, 20 years on from her death, that there is an exhibition. So I think it's so relevant to female art practitioners, but particularly ones who do incorporate their bodies, non-binary, female-appearing art practitioners. Betty, do you think that you can be a respected mainstream artist and also sexy?
I think I'm doing it right now. Or maybe Queenie and I stage our own death. So I think we're lucky to be reflecting on Pat in this way. But yeah, what you're talking about is a very real thing. But I always think to myself, if it wasn't so serious, I wouldn't be laughing so hard.
Right.
And that's just my personal way into it, and people connect with it. And if they don't, that's not their trip, and that's okay not to like everything. But yeah, it's always an invitation in.
One of the things that I often find myself thinking about is who's gatekeeping this situation, or who's the gatekeeper of this institution, who chooses what's allowed in these hallowed institutions. And that brings me back to in-jokes. Like, if our in-jokes are about domesticity, or about sex work, about doing your artwork on the kitchen table and then having to clear the artwork off when your kids get home from school, which is what Pat Larter had to do, then those gatekeepers, if they're straight white men, might not see the in-joke there. Is your work peppered with in-jokes that keep you out of mainstream? I've had really great experience. Like, the more work that I've made and the more I've toured it, my audience is really diverse. So people my parents' age
come. Like people that are unexpected come, and there's a room for lots of different people. But I owe a lot to queer community. That is where I was able to truly experiment a lot and be held and pushed and challenged in a really particular way. So I still think that there would be parts of my audiences that are, maybe more hip to particular ways of being. But I really am about cross-pollinating, so I'm excited that that's happening for me. And yeah, the energy moves in a different way. Yeah, and I don't know who the gatekeepers are. Who are they?
I don't have any of their phone numbers.
But things like we're here talking about this right now, and Pat's here, so.
Yeah, totally. Queenie, do you have exposure to gatekeepers, and do they keep you out?
I think I'm so far away from the gate. I have no idea. But I think that me and Betty being here tonight, I think we can understand that there's no surprise that we are white practitioners. We are people who can talk about our work and like code switch and talk about it in art ways and ways that appeal to our community. I think there's not a surprise about why we are the people that are sitting here tonight. And this is not that we're not hardworking, but I think we're also aware of all the amazing artists who are not seen, and the privileges that we have to make ourselves more visible. I think my art is like, I feel like I really create it for a sex worker community. I create it for a queer community. I feel like I don't have any desire to try and create language that explains my world or explains why I should have space into world to people who don't believe that I should. And so I just can't create art for that audience. Like, it's too exhausting for me. It's not exciting for me.
That's one of the things I found really interesting digging into your art practice, was hearing you say, Queenie, that you just make this stuff for fellow sex workers, and if other people want to kind of piggyback into that, they're kind of welcome, but it's not necessarily for them. Is that right?
Yeah. So that's, I feel like I want the demand for a listener to be able to be critical and open, and also be at a space where they're understanding what I'm talking about. I feel like is not maybe like not your average like fringe goer. It is really about the living criminalized experiences that are very particular to queer and sex worker lives. And I think also I think it's really important that we can just speak in these ways, and that it's not for other people, and that's fine and wonderful, and we can have things that are ours, because there's so few things that are.
So do you ever get reviewed by mainstream publications, Queenie?
Yes, and they are very confused.
They don't get it because you're not speaking to them.
Yeah, they're like, it's been sold out every night, but I have no idea what they're talking about.
I like that so much. It tickles me immensely. One thing that you said, and I want to put this to you perhaps as a closing question for both of you, was that your art practice basically is there to serve you and to make you feel joy. So, Queenie, what happens? Like, what are those circumstances when you do feel joy?
Oh, I just feel like feeling joy is like being deep in community, reflecting all the power and vision of future and possibility that they've given to me, and being able to shine that and honor that, and honor all the workers that have come before me and created these amazing spaces and world, and shown me how to tend to spaces like they're living organisms.
Wow.
I dig that. The ecology.
Cool. Yeah, that's really cool. What about you, Betty?
Yeah, community. So there's this space that happens in between the audience and any artwork, but especially in live performance. It's a space you can feel it electric that you all create together. So when that is happening and you're all riding energy together, and like I said before, seeing and being seen, I think that's the real magic space for things like healing and radical tenderness and hope, energy.
And change? Do people come out changed?
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about, that energy when things are going great.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you could bottle it and make things explode.
So yeah, I feel very privileged to be able to do.
Well, I feel very privileged to talk to you both. Thank you so much for your amazing insights today. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. For more from Queenie Bon Bon, look out for the fundraiser that they organise. It's called Glory Hole, the story night that raises funds for various sex worker funds. The next one is on December the 17th, International End Violence Against Sex Workers Day. I've already bought my tickets and I encourage you to do the same. And you can follow MMA's character's Instagram on @BettyGrumble. And what's the name of your upcoming show?
Yeah, I just did the season of it. It's called Enemies of Grooviness Eat Shit. And we'll do another season soon in Sydney and beyond. But, yeah.
Right. And that's a message to any enemies of grooviness who are still watching. The gallery's open 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily. You don't need a ticket or pre-booking to see the Pat Larter exhibition. Just walk on in. You can also see the general collection under the similar circumstances, but you do need to book and buy tickets for the Archibald, Wynne and Sulman prizes and for the Arthur Streeton exhibitions. Go to the gallery's website for more details. This particular thing is Art After Hours Online, and it's supported by Macquarie University and the Art Gallery Society of New South Wales. Next week is our final Art After Hours Online talk for the year. I'll be hosting and chatting with two artists from Studio A, Megan Pelham and JC Kim, about their epic mural that is on display in the gallery in the foyer when you first walk in. It's as part of Archie Plus project that's titled Love Owls and Mermaids Singing in the Rainbow Pop. So I'll see you next week. My name's Yumi Stynes. Thanks for watching.